KUNST.
Hallo, ik ben Rens Kools en dit is Kunst, Kunst en nog eens kunst. In deze podcast neem ik ruim de tijd om diepgaand met kunstenaars in gesprek te gaan over hun leven en werk. Zo help ik jou om kunst beter te leren begrijpen. Welkom. Welcome, everybody, to Gallery. I'm Rens Kools, and I'm the artist behind this initiative. Gallery debuted in 2012 as a platform for emerging artists through curated online exhibitions and live feeds of performances. Initially leading a nomadic life, Gallery established a foothold here in Antwerp in 2018. And the non-profit artist-run curatorial project organizes short-term events focused on post-conceptual art. Our discussion tonight: why are we still painting? I'm just going to start by introducing our four speakers. The members of the panel this evening are, on my immediate right, there is Jóhanna Kristbjörg Sigurðardóttir.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, really good.
Thank you. She's an Icelandic artist living in Antwerp. Her works are built on combinations of forms and color as visual language that creates relationship and connections between paintings and sculptures, where she deals with surface and space. Therefore, her works can be seen more two-dimensional. There is a kind of physical rhythm and mindful frequency in her works, based on a formal language that she uses, and can also be seen as an abstract manifestation of poetic expression. Jóhanna holds a postgraduate from HISC, that's the Higher Institute for Fine Arts in Ghent, and she currently teaches at the installation department at KUNST in Ghent.
Yeah, thank you.
Next to Jóhanna is Michiel Ceulers. Michiel Ceulers lives and works in Brussels. His practice relentlessly claims its place in a long tradition of painting, but does so by questioning that tradition and the relationship of the still young artist to it. Ceulers' work are not answers, but hypotheses in which various influences, materials, and stylistic features meet. Although Ceulers is best known for his abstract paintings, his practice is built upon a trajectory from figuration to abstraction and back again, in which the reoccurring intentions to renew the medium from the core of its oeuvre. Ceulers graduated from the Rijksacademie van Beeldende Kunst Amsterdam in the Netherlands in 2012, and is represented by Nicodem Gallery in Los Angeles. On my left is Mathieu Verhaeghe. Mathieu Verhaeghe is a visual artist living and working here in Antwerp. He holds a master in philosophy from the University of Antwerp and a master of visual arts from the Royal Academy of Fine Arts, also here in Antwerp. And he builds his artistic practice around the dialogue between existentialism, art, and humor. His approach spans from a variety of media, including sculpture, collage, multiples, and installations. Yet it is painting that holds a central position. Memories, images, and the way in which they resonate with the unconscious nourish the artist's imaginary, simultaneously revealing a profound interest in the space between the sculptural and the painterly. In his ongoing series of sausage paintings, the concept of life, death, and entropy are both subject and material. Through the seemingly simple filling of pork intestine with paint, his work questions and/or reveals the very inner nature of painting, inevitably also expanding on the idea of its death, so often proclaimed in art history, in a playful yet witty manner. Verhaeghe's work is also part of the City collection at Muka in Antwerp since 2021. Then next to Mathieu is Melissa Gordon. Melissa Gordon is an American and British artist based in Brussels. Her painting practice, which is concerned with the histories and behaviors of gesture, incorporates silkscreen, ready-mades, writing, and publishing. Melissa Gordon has a current solo exhibition, Liquid Gestures, at Towner Gallery in the UK. And recent publication of writing include Funny Peculiar and The Embarrassment of Success. Yeah. And she's also a professor of painting at Oslo Art Academy in Norway. So this is our panel for this evening. Please give them all a warm welcome.
Yeah.
So, our discussion tonight, why are we still painting? So I'm going to start by posing the question and then pose it to Melissa Gordon initially. So Melissa, why do you think artists continue to paint? Why are we still painting?
Great. Can you hear me? I can't wait to see the sausage paintings. I'm very excited about those. So I wrote a quick, I hope 5-minute, and I thought this might be interesting to start with some context. Because when you called me, I immediately actually thought about the Jan Verwoerd essay, Why Are Conceptual Artists Painting Again, from 2007. And then the next line is Because They Want to. So I thought it's maybe interesting to go back to this thing, which is about 15 years old. So I took a few quotes from it, and I'm doing just a very quick rundown. So one quote from that is from Verwoerd. He says, the conflict between a conceptual and a medium-specific understanding of artistic practice only becomes comprehensible or understandable in all its intensity and depth of meaning when it is viewed not pragmatically, but historically. So in this essay, Verwoerd sets up a conflict between a medium-based pursuit of contemporary and historic painting versus conceptually driven development of art objects, which might or might not include painterly concerns. So he says either we view painting as something that only pertains to its medium, or we view painting as something that can arise out of any conceptually driven sort of pursuit. But then as an update maybe to the Verwoerd essay, I was also thinking about, there's a David Jozelet essay called On Aggregators, which was written in 2014. And in that text in Oktober magazine, and he proposes this idea that we are actually all living in basically the international style of, instead of the avant-garde of conceptualism, that we are all sort of like repeating the avant-garde gestures of conceptualism, such as document, proof, and instruction. And that this is sort of like a constraining force on contemporary art. And he proposes the aggregate, like Slavs and Tartars or efflux, like these as like forms of authorship as a way out. But Jozelet is not necessarily pointing to a division in the motivation of painting. He's pointing towards the fact that the gestures that exist behind artworks, medium specific or not, need a change or something like a way out. So, this is not much longer. I believe that we're firmly beyond post-medium. Why? Not because painting is having a resurgence, and not because just anyone can paint, regardless of the cynical or practical attempts of numerous artists to engage suddenly in painting after filmic, sculptural, and conceptual practices, because why can't their subjectivities also bleed out into any medium? I would argue that when one speaks in painting, which I think we all speak when we are painting, one speaks to a history of gestures, and then the question is who do those gestures, who decides which gestures speak? So when I say gesture, I just want to clarify what I mean is that I think that gesture itself has agency. That gesture, when we think about gesture, it's the thing that actually moves between the act and the understanding of the act. Gesture is the thing that shows us how to imagine that something has happened. So it's like the firelight flickering to animate cave paintings or film stills coming together, or like myths of Greek statues coming to life. It's like gestures, like the enactment of an idea or an action, but that we see it happening. So I think there's many reasons why people are painting now. One, I would say people paint because it makes them feel good, like taking photos and hoping that people like it. Another reason I think could be about making images and responding to images that arise from the past, like a reinscription into history, and with history. And then just to give that some context, also in that Verwoerd text, he quotes Brian O'Doherty. I can't remember which essay. He says, quote, "I suppose the formal content of a gesture lies in its aptness, economy, and grace." And so O'Doherty is talking about that sort of gestures. They come, they go, they reappear, they resurface, and they become relevant. And I think that's very important right now. And then there are some of us doing this, and this is why I paint, because of a complete inability to language, because nothing is clear, nothing makes sense, because a total and sheer impossibility to understand how, why, and what for. at all. And then I'll end with a quote from Giorgio Agamben, in which he talks about this notion of the gag. It's a quote from the essay Notes on Gesture. He says, however, because being in language is not something that could be said in sentences, the gesture is essentially always a gesture of not being able to figure something out in language. It is always a gag in the proper sense of the term, which indicates, first of all, something that can be put in your mouth to hinder speech, as well as the sense of the actor's improvisation meant to compensate a loss of memory or inability to speak. So I think there's also this idea that maybe people are painting because they don't know how to say it in another way. Yeah.
That they feel it's their only way to express themselves is through painting.
It can't be expressed in language.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Yeah, maybe just for art in overall, not just painting, but I think it's a platform to express and what you cannot say, or also in sculpture, like, yeah. No?
Mm-hmm. Maybe,
It's
yeah,
like
maybe.
Or also just to feel good.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
because I don't know, like, because you have different aspects and you as well of your practice. So you can also like look from the other point, what's the difference between like sculpture and a painterly object. But for me, I think also what I think is really interesting is also the agency and the kind of quickness that arrives in the act of painting. Because for me, it's always interesting, like the friction that happens with the plasticity of painting and then the reflection that follows. Because in a sense, they don't really correlate because it's a different moment. You act, you respond, you drop, you're clumsy, and suddenly it can generate a picture. But then it's your mind who has to work around it. So it's, for me, it's always the interesting aspect of it. It's kind of like through painting, I kind of discover aspects of me that I couldn't see otherwise. So for me, like painting kind of like, I don't think it's another idea of language because I don't think, I mean, they sometimes say like in Dutch, it's a sentence as stupid as a painter. And I think it's not, I think the stupid, like stom, really arrives from that idea of being mute.
Yes.
Because it's a mute language. I do think it's a language. It's not a vocal language and it's not a straightforward language. But I think the relevance of painting, and I think it will always be the relevance of painting, that it's about language, and language adapts. Words enter in the lexicon and move out. And I think in those kind of things that painting still has a relevancy. I mean, the whole idea of like the death of painting, because I was taught in Ghent, and one of my tutors was often going into that kind of discussion. I think it's, in a sense, a beautiful thing that it was like knocked out of his pedestal, that it's no longer like the force that it was, because in a sense, like the crisis of painting and photography propelled the whole agency of the avant-garde. Yeah. Now it's just one of the plural.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to come back to what you said, the first thing I wanted to talk about was actually physicality. So it makes complete sense for me that it's a way to understand yourself in being in the world, that is not describable with words. Or I think the reason I started being involved in art is just that, because language drew short in a way. So that was the first thing on my paper here. So
yeah,
I think that's a very essential part of painting. It's just that it's a physical way of being, and that physicality in our practice is something we start from. So that's the very fundamentals for me, I think.
But is it an extent to language, or is it something that takes over language?
I think it's a language on its own, but
or is it?
That's a semantic question, I think. It's like a semantic discussion, but I think it's a language on its own, in the way that if language is a means to understand your surroundings or how you are in the world, then it's a language has its own quality or its own status. Or
Yeah, and language has been developed to describe moves in painting, like formlessness, or or flatbed, which means like painting flat, but all these, or I don't know, action, or but all of these things I think actually fall short of what a history of gestures is. So like if you talk to painters, a lot of times they're like, oh, a picture in a picture, or like when you say like, yeah, this sort of dumb thing that you do, and then you have to figure out what, I don't even think there's a word for that. And I think that that's really great, but I know exactly what you're saying. But then I think also it's kind of interesting to think like, why now? Like, why do these dumb things and still give them value or give them like interest and time? I mean, I think that's maybe too big of a question, but
no, but that was maybe going to be my next question, is that what I notice now from you is that it really is something for that's personally for you all as artists, as painters, important to do in your studio, to work with those gestures, with that language. But how do you as painters today look at the relevance of painting in today's art scene?
I just actually want to come back to something that Melissa said. I think the idea of the dumb is really essential also for me.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, a stupid idea can really resonate in a beautiful, intelligent painting. And I think, like, also that idea of, like, why do conceptual artists paint again? In a way, because they can be stupid.
Yeah.
I think that's a really big expression, because, like, sometimes the idea of, like, painting a blue square next to a red one is as mundane as can be, but it can result in the most beautiful painting. And I think that's also something that it's really, it doesn't have to do with intellect. It goes about visual ideas and strategies that are actually manifested within a canvas. And I think that's still the beauty of it.
Or also embedded in like a history of having seen those things sort of in action before. Yes. And then that's kind of interesting. That maybe goes back to your question, which is like, I think there's still like quite a lot of space for other voices to come into the dialogue of painting. I think that's like, for me, a very exciting potential, like that there's all these sort of histories of painting that have not been sort of, I mean, even like, for example, I didn't see it, but the Hilma af Klint work being put at the beginning of the Woman in Modernism show in Paris that was happening recently, which is kind of a problematic thing to do. It's like, was she really an abstract artist? Like, that's questionable. Like, was she really involved in the avant-garde of abstraction? I don't know. But then it's important that becomes like parallel. Yeah. So for me, that's exciting.
And then also talking about your question, also looking at contemporary painters. I mean, in preparation of this discussion, I was also looking back on the themes that were being discussed in the Fischli show in Venice that had the title Stop Painting. And therein, I actually wrote it down. He had like 5 moments of crisis. So the first is like the invention of photography. Then it's the collage and the ready-made. Then it's the death of the author. Then it's also like the idea of the commodification. Then you have the avant-garde. And I was just discussing that maybe the new idea of a new crisis is that there's maybe no crisis anymore. And that there's no, in that kind of sense, no real agency to respond to.
Yeah.
So maybe, and that's like sometimes if I look to younger painters, that the way of like spreading the work is sometimes easy, a bit too easy in a way. But maybe that's also because I grew up with that kind of like voice in the back of like, and that kind of inherent sense of the death of a painting.
Yeah.
So it's a question that I have. But it's also a way that I sometimes look at other younger painters.
Yeah.
So the question you have about younger painters is that there's, in their eyes, no real crisis in painting anymore, and that's where they found their new like freedom to go and paint.
Yes.
The distribution networks are changing, that's for sure, but for all painters. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in a way, the question why isn't posed anymore So
That's old.
I think that's what you're trying to.
Yeah, no, in a way, I mean, that was the kind of question how you kind of look to another generation, but it's also because then what we're discussing about like the idea of language and like how you are also being taught and like how to look at certain things and questions and the whole idea, I mean, of the problem of a painting was quite essential, like when I was in the formation of an academy, even though I didn't grow up in the 90s and everything. So I didn't like personally experience that dialogue. You still had it like as a kind of wave because your teachers had that experience. So it's kind of like that. And I kind of have the feeling that some of the younger artists working today in the field of painting didn't really have that question or didn't really propose an answer on it.
Yeah, that would be a good thing maybe to point out now is that we were just discussing this before we started to talk, is that you're all from the 80s.
Yeah.
All four of you. So that was like this funny coincidence that I was trying and look and found to find someone maybe from like an older generation to say so, but they were all a bit hesitant to do so. I think because maybe they were tired of like trying and defend their point and they would just want to be left alone. And it was also difficult to find the younger generation because maybe they're not experienced enough to talk about it. Or maybe it's because what you were just posing is that maybe they don't even ask that question. That maybe they're not even wondering about why they're doing it. They're just doing it. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know. It was just a proposition. I'm not sure why or what's the case for the younger artists because
You're not. Yeah.
I'm not. So
I think there's lots of great younger painters, and I think there's lots of bad older painters too.
Yeah, of course.
yeah, but it doesn't have to do with good or bad. I think.
But then I think what's interesting is like when you were talking, it reminded me of when I actually studied. I studied for 6 months in New York, and I had a teacher who was saying, like, it was Jacqueline Humphreys, and she was like, "You go to these 8 shows every week." And when you started doing that, it was like there was so much style. There was so much about style, and so and actually, when I think about now and all these distribution networks like Instagram or all. And like, people, and I think like, actually we're still engaged in this like pretty like expansive search for, and there's maybe multiple styles. So like in New York, it would be like, okay, there's certain sort of like neo-realistic, graphic-y things happening now. And then everyone would go like, why is this happening? And then 6 months later, it would be something else, and I remember that sort of really, yeah.
That's something I would like to pick up on this distribution networks you were talking about. Like you said, for example, Instagram. What do you think about do you think that those kind of new networks made a difference in what painting is? Do you think it changed even painting itself? Or is it just, does it serve the painting, or do you think it's even changed what painting is?
I think in the first place, it changes the way we look at paintings, for sure. So I think we lose a kind of sense of slowness, which is also like intrinsically part of painting. Because it's different to see a painting on your mobile than it is in real life. Yeah. But I don't know what the implications are of that yet. But I think that's one of the main things that's changing now, that we consume it differently. That's for sure.
Young people today will also have their own problem. It's like there is always a problem. You will always have to be in a dialogue with what's happening in society. Maybe like they are, for sure they have their own thing now.
But I mean, stylistically, and I mean, that's something that I noticed, and I'm never proved that was the case, but also because I think of the screen and the flatness of it, I saw a real re-emergence and an interest in the idea of spray painting, just with guns. What's the other one? Airbrush. Like really like painting that really goes for the flatness again. I saw that within an image. And also, like, I can talk about my own experience. Around 2015, I was making abstract paintings. You all had this market interest in it, what they were calling crabstraction or zombie formalism.
Oh, yeah.
And it's also like how the speed of things were going. So I kind of also sometimes had the feeling that a lot of like the market interest was based on the kind of likes that a painting could get. So, I mean, because the idea, like painting being reduced to something flat, to a JPEG, is something that kind of happened. So, totally. I mean, it's also something that we kind of saw the problem arise during the COVID crisis, is how to articulate the object of a painting within a viewing room setting. So that's like a kind of like thing that kind of I found problematic. And then my personal response nowadays, like I often work with glitter or like with mirrors within the paintings to kind of like, in a way, object to that notion of the documentation. Because in a way, like, yeah, it's so easy. It's almost like, swiping through Tinder sometimes, like going to the, so it's like
Tinder for painting.
Yeah, it is really like that. So it's, that's something. And I thought in a way that the airbrush, but also like a lot of painting that deals with the idea of pixels or like icons or like sometimes you had like, you know, like the logos on your iPhone, sometimes they went from spatial render to a graphic design. And you kind of had the feeling that like also in that kind of like painting, I recognized that in it. So it's that kind of distribution I think is totally different at the moment.
I mean, I think I have like two sides. Like one thing is that I'm really not interested in social media, but I actually love the breadth of paint. Like I love the breadth of things I can see on Instagram, like but I'm not into it, but I love the exposure. But then on the other side, I feel like, and also I have like a student who actually now is like, she's so good on Instagram that she shows me all these artists that I've never heard of. And I love that. Like, I love that I get to know things and that I get to see into things of shows that I can't go to. And, you know, I'm a mom, so it's like, I can't travel around the world, like, you know, but then the other side is like, on the other flip side, I had a friend come into the studio recently before I shipped a bunch of paintings out. And she is an artist, but was involved in a graphic design. And then she sort of started talking about them in graphic terms. And like my soul crumbled. You know, I was like, oh my God, I never thought about this. But when things then start getting viewed like in that construct, I realized like, oh no, how can we still view them as paintings? Like still view them as like these messy, sloppy things that have like stretchers and like marks and bad things. And then like when that all gets erased into like something, then I think like, oh, okay, well, how we're missing something here. Like we're actually missing something in the communication. Yeah. Which unfortunately happened to me in a studio visit. But
I think it's also I tried out art history for a year, and then like they always talked about the idea of archiving, that you have to wait a certain time to look at something. And I kind of also have that idea with like the whole acceleration through kind of like Instagram and everything, that you're kind of in a constant now, so that there's no mode of reflection. So the whole idea of temporality kind of like is flattened out. So basically what you said, like the whole kind of thing, like you have to watch those 8 painting shows in New York.
Yeah.
And they kind of make sense in New York because you have a local history and a context, and certain institutions, certain teachers. Suddenly that kind of gets transported to say like Antwerp or that and that. And so you kind of have those different warp images or styles that come together. And I think that's also something.
Yeah, that's true.
Quite strange in a way.
And do you think that was sort of like an affective? I'm really curious to hear about. I want the report from Inside Zombie Formalism. Because you were saying that people were saying what you were working on was part of that.
Yeah, I mean,
I never had a problem with it. I thought it was really interesting and generative.
I mean, for me, it gave me opportunities, but at the same time, it's also where the factor is that they were speculating and throwing my works on auction.
That's a different thing, isn't it?
That's a problem.
Yeah.
But I mean, just if you saw some of the art gossip, like people like Christian Rosa,
Yeah.
who were like the biggest thing, and then like a year later, like 2 zeros of their prices were gone.
Yeah.
And now he's been like, the FBI is like looking for him because he didn't have other means of income anymore. So it's kind of like how fast that goes. And then now we're changing it for something else. So that's...
Yeah, that's interesting.
Back to the moderator.
I want to talk now about something completely different. We talked about this distributing and the showing on this new technology and how it maybe changes, I don't know, the way we paint or we look at what painting is. But I want to come back to Mathieu, something you said, this slowness of painting and how that is like important to painting and that it's maybe a bit lost now with these fast technologies. But I want to talk about that regarding to like the process of painting, like in the studio. And I want to ask the four of you, like, how important for you is this work-like process, like working in the studio, probably alone, no?
Mm-hmm.
So it still has this kind of romantic image to it. Painting, it's something rather slow. It takes time. So I don't know, maybe how does that work-like process relates to this fast medium of scrolling through Instagram or something, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the first has to do with production, and the second has to do with consumption of the artwork. Or
Precisely, yeah.
So, but for me personally, there's still a big gap in between both. So for me, I don't feel that much changing in my studio work because of Instagram. Because Instagram is, once your artwork is made, you put it out in the world and then it's viewed by others. But that's just personal. For me, it's, or maybe it is already unconsciously, but my process is still relatively unaffected by the social media. But
if we don't take this new technology if we weren't to talk about that and we just were talking about like showing paintings in shows, in physicality, if we just were to talk about that and how important for you personally is this process of painting, the putting in the work, the slowness.
Yeah, it's everything, because I'm the artist. So for me, it's what we do. Huh?
Yeah, but why is that something? Why is it something you feel like comfortable in? The slowness. Yeah, I don't know. Because I don't know, maybe because I'm looking for a kind of depth in my life to understand things in a more profound way. That's why I started making art, actually. So.
But you decided to make slow art.
No. But I think making painting is a slow thinking process. No.
Yeah.
I mean, if you compare it to other ways of.
I also think painting
expressing ourselves or thinking, so.
It's like more of a mental space or something. You're in another dialogue than when you do sculptures or physical. Like for me, at least, it's.
But maybe I'm just assuming it's a slow process. Huh? Maybe
I don't think it's necessarily.
No, and
It's slow for me.
No, exactly. I don't think that's.
No, I mean, for me, the time between actions can be slower because then you have the whole mental reflection. You almost staring back at yourself and trying to figure out what you did. But mostly when they ask me how long it took, I would say like 3 or 4 sessions of like half hour, 45 minutes. And then a lot of times just sitting there and wondering what
that's
you
what
did.
I mean. I mean, I take in consideration the whole process, of course. Huh? So
I'm not so quick at it, but
there's also like we all go, well, we don't go in every day because we don't necessarily have the time to do that. But essentially, like, I think everybody has like this thing that happens pretty regularly, like, and then when it goes out is like totally irregular. And that's maybe where that sort of dissonance starts happening. Cause it's like, I think of myself as pretty darn busy every day, but I might not have a show for 2 years. And frankly, that's fine, and then all of a sudden there might be a few things and people go, oh, you're so busy. I'm like, no, I've been busy for every day for 3 years. Like, that's what we all do, and then, the things that you've made, like, then find ways to talk to other things. And I think that's where I have the problem of like this expectation that you have to like, or that it happens not just on Instagram, it happens at universities, it happens with galleries, it happens in lots of different ways, right? Like all of a sudden someone, these expectation happen.
Of producing or
like, yeah, show me what you've been up to. And you're like, well, I can show you all this stuff. And some of it's ready, some of it's not ready. Yeah.
And Jóhanna, how do you work in your studio?
Yeah.
For you, it takes more time to
I think
produce, or?
No, I think I just stay in my studio and do a little bit of something and try out other things and turn from painting to sculptures or play a little bit, listen to, it depends on actually, but I don't think I'm a painter for one. I'm more of a painter in a way that I like, for me, the sculptures and the paintings, and it's all just a layer. I think for me, the space in a way, or how I install it, that's like the frame. I'm more like, I think I of course don't come from a painting, like, in Iceland there was no painting department when I did my BA. There we just do visual art. Just for that, but you want, or like you find out, so I'm not so. I don't think I'm dedicated painter in a way. It's just part of my work, because I think with painting, I think I can create extra space or something. So it's one layer of creating some kind of extra space for me. Mental, or like with color, and then there are like sculpture, like it comes together. So I don't work with only surface, but I don't know. So depends. Mostly I try to have fun, or like I try to free myself from stopping too much. So I don't know. It's tricky.
It sounds relational, which is like, I think, part of every artist's practice.
Yeah, we all have our, I think.
But that's what I mean by that it's a slow process. Like maybe you can finish artworks but formulating a sentence or something you want to say as an artist is something that's for me much slower than talking to you right now, because now I just pour out my words, and you don't pour out an exhibition, or you don't pour out I don't know, maybe.
And then why is that important? Why is that important to take the time to take it slow, to formulate?
But I don't have a choice in that. Feel myself, so that's why I say it's personal. I think every artist has his own.
Just right back at the beginning that you're saying that it's something next to language. That's a means for you to express yourself is through painting. And you don't feel you have any other ways of doing that as through that medium. That's maybe it. I can understand from it.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to this thing of like I literally have no idea if what I do each day is interesting at all, and and then it takes like, I have to look at it and go like, I think this is terrible, or maybe it's not. Yeah. I don't know. And then you have to develop the reasons as to why it is or isn't, which is like a separate logic.
But is that even necessary to value it if it's, or like, do you do it and then, I don't know. Yeah, it's a question.
Yeah, you fight with things like gimmick. Like I fight with gimmick all the time. Like, is it too jokey? Is it too gimmicky? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like,
and scale and...
It's something I just came up with now, but I was wondering in the middle of this talk, like maybe we should have started with what the definition of painting is.
Then people going like, no, in the audience.
Something else.
open that to a wider.
If someone of you guys, I don't know, could try and formulate one, or do they think that they have one, or maybe it would be interesting to hear all four of you their ideas about the definition of painting. Mathieu?
I pass on this one. Yeah. So no, it's too. It's too.
Yeah.
Is it too hard to formulate?
But you cannot do... I think is it possible?
No. I mean...
Definition of painting. Like,
No.
How many point of views do we have there?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But like for me, like something that really interested me, I was living also a time in Germany, and there you have like two distinctions of like painting. You have malen und streichen.
Yeah, yeah.
And like malen is like the real, like the grand thing, like making a painting. And like streichen is just applying paint.
Yeah.
And sometimes like, I don't know, sometimes in the studio, I feel like that I'm more in that kind of second mode.
Yeah.
And for me, that's kind of interesting because I think in a way, like it's maybe a way out for me. But then like really, I also like the idea, like in English, that painting is an object and an action as well. So it's those kind of things. But if that's a definition of painting, then like for me, these are things to think about and how to look at something. But that's for all of us in a different way.
It's difficult to talk about, huh?
I think what he said.
Yeah, but
Yeah, it sounds
once you
good.
try to pinpoint it, then it's.
But maybe
It's a
hard
gunner.
to come up with this general description of what painting is, but maybe it's easier to describe what painting is for you personally. Or do you also pass on that question?
There's things that are like concerns that surround it, right? That are problematic, like authorship is this thing that like circles painting and it's problematic. Like picture, like the notion of picture is problematic. The history of sort of like depiction, material thing that appears to be something else yet is just material, that idea of flatness, I think, is like wrapped up in that, So, and then there's like fresco. You know what I mean? I think there's like the portable painting and non-portable painting. I mean, do you know what I mean? Like there's expanded painting. But I mean, it's interesting because actually that's why contemporary painting is so like hard, because there's no, I don't know how to say, like container that feels like, okay, expanded painting, Michael Mujeres, like, or something's moving off the canvas. There's no like,
Yeah, it reminds me of the Philip Guston scraping off a painting and then trying to explain why he did it. And then he says because it looked too much like a painting at a certain point. So that kind of indicates that it's very tricky to try to pinpoint what it actually means for an artist to... Because he says, like, I didn't experience anything through the process of making it. So, but even that's for him personally. Yeah, but so giving a definition of painting is like, I don't know if that's even a possibility. I think it's very...
Make it easier for you, or make it, I don't know, maybe even more harder. Is painting a process, or is it a product?
A process?
It's both.
I think also both.
For me, it's a process. Of course, it's a product when you just take it out of the contents or something. Like if you say it, it's a... But, yeah.
depends on what team you're on.
Yeah.
What helmet you put on.
Yes.
Maybe it's a process in the studio and becomes a product in the exhibition space.
not if someone is interested, then it's a.
I guess it's also wrapped up in like what you envision, like as an artist, because I think a lot of people have like this idea of an audience in their head, and that's actually like a really difficult thing because you might have this like ideal audience, and then you are like alone without that ideal audience, and you have to come up. Do you know what I mean? Like you're like, oh man, people are gonna love this, and then it's actually just you that's deciding that. So that's where I think that shift from process to product is like fantasy, like kind of your own fantasy that you enact for yourself, which is kind of like a funny mind game. Like that's sort of inaccurate. I mean, I'm making sort of fun of the role of the artist in a way. I don't mean to be that way, but it's interesting to think about that. Oftentimes you think it might enter into a lexicon or a conversation, but actually what you're left with is maybe a totally different conversation.
I mean, I can also talk for myself when they like were speculating on my work at a certain moment, like you have tendencies and fashions that shift. And like I went from selling quite well to certainly nothing anymore. And for me, that notion, I really felt free in a sense. Because like you had the idea that it became back really like on the level of process and not on the product. Because you do, in a way, without wanting to admit it or not, sometimes work and stage paintings in a context of a dialogue you perceive. Yeah. So it's tricky, but like I really knew like, okay, I can make this shit because nobody will care for it anyway. Yeah, exactly. But I did.
There's a freedom. That's an amazing moment.
And then like I could really make shit. Like I could make things that nobody would ask the question of like, how will this, stay like this? Like, how will this cookie on this painting stay like this? Like, it's like, I mean, nobody was.
I'm going to eat it.
Yeah. So it's like, then it really became process again for me. But that was just an experience that I had. Killed the object in a way.
Mm-hmm. Before we open up this talk to the audience, there's just one more thing I would like to talk about, and it's regarding this product versus progress kind of way of thinking is posing the question, why are we still painting? Also immediately poses the question, like, why are we still making art? I mean, asking the one question is automatically also asking that other question, because I really consider myself a conceptual artist, and I work with a dematerialized practice. So in preparation for this talk, I watched another talk from 2010, which is called "The Trouble with Painting," which can be found online. And there, the moderator, David Thorne, tells, and I'm going to read it now, a painting has become the commodity par excellence, a venal symbol of the commercial degradation of art. The more sublime and or autonomous a painting, the more readily the wealthy buy it, reducing it to pure wall decoration. It is elitist entertainment, a status symbol, an invest property. Everything except the sacred object it purports to be. So that will be my last question to you is like, is painting more than just, is painting today, is it more than just a marketable commodity?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think, things, there's always a sort of like, like Isabel Gras is like very interested in like how the market affects authorship in painting, right? And I think what's actually kind of interesting, like I'm gonna shift that like question, because I think that's based on the notion that like the notion of the ready-made is obsessed with market value, that one sort of enters into the history of the ready-made, and then painting enters into the history of the ready-made when it becomes an object, that the ready-made operates as something like a dialogue that engages in value. But like if we actually, and this is what I mean by like reinscribing gestures into history, if we like look back and maybe really take it that maybe Duchamp did not submit the fountain, that it was this other woman, Elsa von Freytag-Loringhoven, and that in fact, like, perhaps the fountain was a political act and it was like a protest about gender and it was a protest against war. And that rather than think, you know, do you know what I mean? So it's like this myth has been put on to these things, like, but I think it's an angle, and I think like there's other narratives, you know what I mean? That, and I don't think the narrative has to be that it's like, and because also the myth of the fountain is wrapped up, like Duchamp, like he didn't, he editioned them in the early 60s. And so basically like the fountain was submitted in 1917. There's like a 30-year gap where like nothing happened. It didn't exist. It wasn't part of art history, but we have this myth that it was this moment that changed things. It didn't. He changed it in 1963 when he reinscribed it into the myth of modernism. So it's like, do you know what I mean? Like that, I think that I think the commodity also is a myth. Like it's a myth of inscription that happens at random times. Maybe at the moment that you're making it, maybe 100 years later. Do you know what I mean? But I think it's definitely present, but it runs parallel, like, or yeah, to me.
Parallel with?
Practice, yeah. It's like present. It's like the train going next to you, but it might be going like far away or like crashing into you, you know, but I think it's not, you're not always on that train, you know, like you might be on a donkey, you know, going off the edge of a hill. At least, you know, I feel like that sometimes. Yeah.
Any other remarks on that question? Because I still might have a few.
No,
because if we're talking about these new technologies and these new ways of looking at paintings through new networks like Instagram, like we talked about before, then if it's shared in that way to a broad audience, then why is it still important that there's still this physicality to that object? Why is it still important that a painting is a physical thing that can be, that can be put in the market?
I mean, I think why it's important that it's a physical thing, because we're physical beings. And for me, like, I mean, there's also like that idea of discussion about the painterly surface as a skin, where I often object to, but it is, I mean, it is a result of our humanity. The act of painting is describing yourself onto a surface becomes that. So I think that idea of physicality of the object really becomes apparent. And then also the idea of the unique is also something, because like we try to be someone or something. So the idea of making it, you also want to create something new. I mean, that's the whole notion while we're sitting here also.
Yeah, and Isabel Gras talks a lot about the idea that like the painting has this sort of life force. So it's like all of us, when we make something, I guess, I mean, there's a myth or a vision that like we dump or imbue our life into this object. And I think that's very present in mythologies. And I think that sustains something, but I think we each have the possibilities to like interact with that still. And I wish I did have a opinion on how contemporary painting deals with that. I just know that, I don't know what else to say. Like, I don't feel like I have an overview that can say like, but I'm not so sure about it. I'm not so sure about this sort of myth of this sort of like soul, like dust that gets dumped on these things. But because I think it sort of also throws out the idea that like there's a long dialogue of moves and references, and I don't know, maybe they're not opposed. I don't know. Like there's that great painting by of Emile Zola by Manet. Have you ever seen that? And it's like Emile Zola is sitting at his desk and he has the printout of the Manet painting and then all these references to sort of his friendship with Manet. And the painting is essentially like a document of their friendship, and their influences on each other. And it's like, yeah, it's fantastic actually. And now yeah.
Well, we have reached that point in the evening where we will open up for discussions. So now, who would like to ask a question?
Yeah.
Go.
Well, yeah, the first question you asked was like, why are you still painting? And I heard my answers, but they all went from formalism, how you deal within your atelier with your formal practice, how you change your transition, how you reflect on what happened in the art world before you, blah, blah. And what I was missing was like, how do you deal with what happened around you outside of the atelier in the real world? Talking about the zeitgeist, and especially like we all come from Western countries without any problems during our practice, and we never faced the problem like a crisis or like isolation or loneliness or any of these things, and that you actually start thinking about why I'm making work, what's the function within the world, what am I bringing back? And I didn't hear any of those answers. It was all based on me in the atelier or like the transition with the media, how you portray your work in digital world, but nothing. You don't talk about the real ones. And that was one I've dealt with those 2 years of isolation, or did you question your everything that you do and the functionality of that? And that's what I wanted to hear with the title of this talk. Yeah.
I have had that. There's exactly this. It's a good way to think also. But maybe every artist has that at some point, like what are we?
I mean, I feel like I'd have to do a whole artist talk, like to describe how all the things I use like come from the world or don't. But of course things come from the world around. Yeah.
But
Things change.
Yeah, as a just personal thing for me, like also during the whole kind of COVID ordeal, I painted because it made me feel sane in a sense. Like that was the one continuation that I had, and as well, like I suddenly had like a space and time to really work in. And also during this lockdown, I was going to happen already like a year or 2 years ago. I was working on a catalog of my work. So for me, it was also like a trip going back at certain stuff. But for me, the act of painting was also to deal with that. And I'm not saying that I didn't really address like big topics in my work, but for me, it was just that notion of control. Because as a thing, like what I really found particular during this lockdown crisis is the idea of choice or something that's forced upon you. Because painting as a practice is already quite solitary, but often that's by choice because you're then alone in the studio. But like when it becomes unforced of you, then it's like a whole different thing. Maybe you're solitary the same amount of hours, but suddenly that becomes more threatening in a sense. So for me, it was really like the one thing that I could manage, my relationship to the canvas. And then I don't think that I had worldly implications for the rest of society, but as an artist, I felt the commitment, and really also it enlarged my own conviction of the relevance of it. Even if it's just was for like a personal mental state. That's what I can say about that.
I became obsessed with all the fences and barriers that are going up, and those have come in. Like, I don't know, like all these goddamn fences. And tape and fence and another fence, then a plastic fence, then a metal fence, and So I know what you mean,
So just to recapitulate, the question from the audience was that in the first question that I posed was, why are we still painting? And the remark from the audience came that it was mainly focused on personal issues in the studio, but that wasn't really a link in what happened in the real world, like, for example, the COVID crisis. So do you feel that that question is answered?
Not really, because for me personally, it was like a big issue. Like you start questioning more your practice, and when you see there's more important things going on, then I want to hear that. If you dealt with those things a bit, because I don't know.
Yeah, there you can.
And it was just saying that because the title of this talk, I thought it was really focused on during which time the change that has happened, and it felt like everything that was said was just totally not talking about that at all. It was
Maybe you can formulate it slightly different, like in the way, like, is there anybody in this whole room that actually think LinkedIn is irrelevant? Or because I think everybody's, I don't know, is in arts in some way and related to it. It's quite obvious that painting is relevant, but it would be interesting to like put a plumber on the table, or somebody who has painting plays no role in their lives.
Irrelevant for who, like.
What?
Irrelevant for who or what? Or, but the answer your question is
very basic.
Like we say, like, okay, why are we still painting, like, for the world? Is that your question? I feel like, or like, how does it go outside of this artistic context?
Yeah.
Are there people that have sort of solved that before for you?
Sorry?
Are there people that have like solved that for you well in the past?
Other artists who have solved
Who like represent a good?
that have an actual
Well, just to refocus a bit, the question coming from the audience was, is there anyone opposed to the question, why are we still painting? No, not opposed to the question, but I mean to the idea of the relevance of painting.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying, and I can honestly answer that I am.
You're opposed to the relevance of painting? Oh, yeah.
I'm opposed to that, and that's why I was asking the question.
Yeah.
So there is someone in this room that really is opposed to that. So, but yeah.
Speak about what Melissa was saying when she was quoting a Gambit talking about the gag, and then you mentioned yourself the notion of muteness in painting, and you were forever using spoken language and written language to try to talk about painting. That's the only way that it's possible. And now and then a new word comes up, like in Isabel Verbal, you have the notion of volition, and then that opens up a whole new kind of like way of considering what is done. And then I was thinking when you were talking about, you mentioned gesture, so at some point you were giving an explanation of what you meant by that, and I was thinking of this term that's used for, it's mainly used, we're mainly kind of conscious of it in terms of medicine, it's this word metastasis, but it's actually also used to consider rhetoric. What's nice about it is, or what's interesting about it is, for me, is that it's how you move around something, and how you might move around in spoken language, because you might move around quickly and nimbly, so that the attention isn't drawn to something that you've just said. So you move on to something like that. And I often think about that when I'm looking at painting, is like, where is the person moving me along here? What do they not want me to see? How are they controlling it? And I think it's often kind of like not a conflict, but it's like a struggle or a tension between where the person who's making the work is wanting to draw your attention to or away from and moving you around, and kind of like maybe even my own part, a reluctance to let that happen. This is how I'm talking now about an experience of painting with regards to leading off from this thought of the gag to other ways in which we experience painting in relationship to the person who has made it. Do I need to make a question out of that?
No.
I have
I think about what I think of public elsewhere. I think
What?
I think about how you move the speed with which you move somebody along in terms of like the first take and then the second take. And how what you're dealing with in subject matter is in relationship to how much time it feels like it's being spent and volition exerted. And that the ratio is really quite crucial.
Yeah.
More or less statement, maybe. That question. Totally fine. Let's maybe move on to the last question.
Okay, I have a question that's a bit of, we kind of understand the kind of disappointment Philip was trying to express also with the answers that were given to the question, the central question of this talk. Thanks for your contributions, I really appreciate it, but I think it's too easy to get away with this. US painters with a capital P, right? Painting has been declared dead on several occasions. Right? It's been resurrected as zombie formalism, more recently as zombie figuration. Huh? So the question is, how do we move on from there? We are here, 2021, still talking about painting, still talking about slowness, the studio, etc. My suggestion would be to talk about the post-studio practice. Think of Daniel Beren, for instance. We're talking about decades ago, right? When we're talking about painting, I would suggest to replace it with the painterly, much more interesting. And then let's have another round of discussion, another hour or two. Because I feel like nothing's really happening in painting. Does it even, I know it's slow, but it's a bit too slow. Does something ever happen in painting? Or is it just like, am I looking at the bottom there, really? Absolutely. What is happening in painting? I'm asking you. It's really honest question.
Yeah.
I keep on hearing the same fucking stories. Like painting has been declared dead, it's been resurrected. I mean, the studio, oh my God, the studio. Does painting also happen outside of the studio?
Yeah.
I think so, also.
It depends on how you see a painting. Is it just to catch an image, or do you, what is a painting necessarily a thing on a canvas or surface? It's also just how you look at things. And
painting has a function, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. It heals people. It's giving and taking in life, and painting is also giving to the world. You can't live alone.
No.
We all live together, and painting is a way of talking, and it has a function like it used to have. People needed money, so they painted portraits. They received money. I think we don't have to think too far. It's very basic.
I also actually agree on that. And when I was thinking beforehand, why are we still painting? And then I was really thinking, when have we not been doing that? And also, we have kids, and what do we occupy our kids with? What is what is the first basic creativity of upbringing of a child? You give him a paper and you give him a pen. It's just so, it's not even, I don't know. And then some people become artists and make a painting and that, but still it's really primitive, the cave painting, drawing. I don't know. It's why are we still painting? It's
I would actually like to reply to Peter, and sometimes I also question myself what's next, but I think it's quite hard to because the thing is, we're in the same context, we're still in the same paradigm, and if you look at certain frictions that happen, we're responsible on stuff, and I kind of feel if you look at where art is going now, that you kind of are actually a bit where Dantos said it, art after the end of art, and we're there. And it's kind of hard to answer on what your question is, because you can't really think outside of the frame. I think we're still in the frame, in a way.
You mean the literal sense, or?
That can be a play on words within the painterly sense, but I think I know sometimes I also have that thing, and I know sometimes I don't think that
Yeah.
the biggest revelations within the spectrum of painting can
Yeah.
happen.
Also, like, oh, it'd be so sad if like the painters that I like sort of answered this. Like, it'd be like imagine going to Kelly James Marshall, like, what do you think now? Like, come on, man, update it. It's like, oh, but I think he had I mean, obviously he's been doing this for like years and years and years, you know, and it comes out of like a really long, but it's so relevant, you know, and then, but was it relevant when he first started doing it? I don't know. And then, I don't know. And then actually, I think that's what I mean is I think like sometimes people do stuff for years and years and nobody's paying attention. And then all of a sudden it becomes relevant. And I think they have been living in the world, you know.
I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
To come back also to the question that Philip formulated, like, if you ask about the raison d'être of painting, is painting really about painting, or can it also be related to something outside of that?
Well, that's exactly the Jan
because that
Verwoerd
actually was
talks
the-
about. Yeah, that's the Jan Verwoerd essay, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I read it. Yeah. So that's
That was actually implied in the first question a bit, what you're saying now. But because I wanted to say it also depends a bit on what you're trying to tackle as an artist, I think. So the question of like, for me, something like a corona crisis didn't like directly affect my work. And that has something to do, I think, with what kind of work you make or what's your intention as an artist. So I think for some artists who are more responsive, it would like immediately intrude the practice. But I think that's something you can't take for granted. Can't ask for every artist. I mean, so I think some artists play on other levels.
I understand that. I know your work, and that's why I was also trying to answer the question is you still call it painting. I know your work, so I will call it painter D.
Yeah, of course.
So that's an interesting.
Yeah, and that's
historically installations in makes, like sculptures in makes. It's like, would you still call it painting? Well, it's not a canvas. It's not a flat surface. It's not medium specific. It leaves its own domain.
Of course, we only have an hour, but like what you're suggesting now is also something I couldn't tackle tonight, but it's still a proposal that it's painting. I mean, I think if you paint today, you always make a proposal to look at it as a painting. I think you can't get out of that anymore. So what you say about the painterly, I totally agree on that. So,
But I think I did at the beginning. I really do believe like that there are probably other motivations, but I think one motivation that exists right now is like pure self pleasure, and then to like send it into the world and hope people like it. Like that, I really think that that's happening.
I think it always starts.
Yeah,
So
totally. And then I think there are.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's a bad thing at all. I really think, and then I think that some people are really struggling with history. You know, I think that there's like a really, like, there's why painting now? Because we're reevaluating history. Like, because history is changing, because there's a total reevaluation of who gets to speak, what position, what identities, like, and that's like, to me, a pretty amazing motivation for painting. And then I think there's people that like, I really do believe that like, there's some people that like, there's no making sense of it. And to me, I'm interested in that. Like I can't make sense of it. And that's interesting for me. But then I think there's other things going on. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that that's definitive, but from my perspective, that's, I think, 3 motivations why people are still painting.
My question was more because it was just amazing. You brought up like you didn't affect you, and I just wanted to hear like these personal stories during those times. It was not like, oh, you don't care about those. It was more, I was just amazed that you didn't. I didn't see it because you were talking about it. Because that was my main idea with the title. Was wow, it's going to be about that. How it turned into somewhere else. It's like, wow, these people must be so happy doing what they do. So yeah, I wanted to like a small. Like,
no, but I think it's actually a good question. I mean,
Increased migraines due to computer time, lack of daycare, you know, sort
Just
of
to
like.
sum up this last question that was posed from the audience was that like, what is happening in painting? That was the question, I guess. Talking about because this evening there was a lot of talk about this studio-based practice, but from the audience the question came that we should talk about this post-studio practice maybe. So and the raison d'être of like painting. So do you feel in any way that this question is answered? So let's conclude our evening here. Thank you to the four of you, Mathieu, Melissa, Michiel, Jóhanna. Thank you to the audience also. So one last round of applause.
Yes, dank u. De aflevering werd mede mogelijk gemaakt door Studio 27, jouw marketingbureau uit de Kempen. Wij hebben er in ieder geval al keihard van genoten.